Okay, while people are logging in still, I'm going to go ahead and get us started with just some housekeeping notes and our introduction. First of all, I want to say welcome to our webinar this month. My name is Stephanie Tierney. I am the Director of Marketing Communications and Member Engagement for ECIA. So again, thank you for joining us. We have a really great topic. We had over 230 registered to attend today. It's pretty exciting. Our topic is ChatGPT, Midjourney, and Generative AI, how the components industry can supplement its sales and marketing tactics. And we are, of course, very happy to have our friends from Lectrix leading this topic today. Lectrix is one of ECIA's valued service partners, and their team has been an integral part of PACE and other projects over at ECIA. We will be using the Q&A feature today for questions, so please feel free at any time to submit a question or comment through that feature on the platform. Also, this will be recorded. We will hopefully put that up on our website within the next couple of days. So that is it from me. You all will be in mute as usual, but again, use that Q&A feature. I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Jeff Foreman, VP of Marketing for Lectrix.
Hey everybody, thank you very much, Stephanie. So first, thanks for everyone for joining today's conversation. I know this is a bit of a hot topic, I guess, as they would say, which is why we kind of wanted to dive in. So before we get started, I'm going to let Jordan introduce himself real quick, and then I'll pick up from there and we'll dive in.
Yeah, hey everyone, thanks for joining. My name is Jordan Wu. I am the Director of SEO here at Lectrix.
Perfect. And I'm Jeff Foreman. As Stephanie mentioned, I'm the VP Marketing here at Lectrix. Lectrix is a marketing agency and a publisher that services pretty much entirely just the electronics component space, working with manufacturers, reps, and distributors, everything from content production, SEO, marketing automation, and all of that fun stuff. But the topic today is not us, it's generative AI, ChatGPT, Midjourney. A large number of platforms out there these days are now utilizing concepts from generative AI or already existed prior to this storm that really started in, I guess, late December, early January with ChatGPT. But, to answer the question, what is generative AI? I asked ChatGPT to define it. And at the end of the day, to summarize it, ChatGPT and other generative AI platforms are really a collection of machine learning algorithms that are trained on a set of information to generate content. So you'll hear the concept of a natural language processing model, for instance, which is the foundation for a lot of this type of content, especially around ChatGPT, which is communicating through text. But to simplify the description, I asked ChatGPT to describe it at a 5th grade level. And I actually thought it did a pretty interesting job at giving something to compare to. At the end of the day, generative AI generates. That's where that generative comes from, and it generates content. And content can be anything from text to code, and we'll be discussing this. But ChatGPT said it's kind of like a robot artist that can make new paintings or stories by studying other paintings or stories. It can create music by listening to music. And essentially it's taking that material and it's in its own, AI mind, painting what that ideal picture is and giving that as a result based off the input you provide or the description or direction that you're providing. A lot of people don't realize that music can be a component of generative AI, but a lot of people also don't realize how expansive generative AI is. So in our conversation today, in our discussion today, we're really focusing on generative AI as a tool to aid sales and marketing within the electronics component industry. That said, it is way more than that. It is, ChatGPT is not the definition of generative AI. Generative AI models and platforms out there have existed for actually a couple of years. They're not necessarily new. The graphic I have on the right side here, this is actually from November of last year, prior to the real boom that started from ChatGPT and kind of this AI arms race between a lot of the tech companies. But generative AI can produce everything from text to video, to code, as I mentioned, 3D models. It could be used in product design, simulation, so simulating weather patterns or simulating the effects of a vehicle against air resistance. It can be used to define and support process in an organization. Think digital supply chain efforts, for instance. Generative AI is going to have a major influence in the digital supply chain, or the concept of digital twins, especially in the area of supply chain over the next few years, for sure. Outside of the background, let's dive a little bit into how it's actually used. So interesting enough, this image here, I asked Midjourney, which is a generative AI art platform, to paint me a picture of a perfect world. And this is what it gave me. So a little bit sunny. I don't know if I'd call it a perfect world necessarily, but pretty enough, and kind of summarizes a lot of, I think, our discussion here is, you have to know what you're asking for, and you have to understand that with the results you get, you really want to pay close attention to everything you're receiving. Here's some recommendations, ideas, things you could use pretty much today. A lot of this, we didn't want to focus on reach concepts. This isn't telling you have to buy a whole bunch of platforms, although we will refer to one specific type of platform into this outside of something like ChatGPT. But here's an easy one. Manufacturers. We work with manufacturers constantly at Lectrix, and we know in relationships with distributors or technical publications, content is always popular, and sharing that content is always a big time request. The problem is, from an SEO side of things, duplicate content can be a flag, a negative flag that says this content isn't authentic from this source, it was stolen from another location, and so on. So one thing that you can do using ChatGPT in this case, and that's going to be, ChatGPT is going to be the most recurring theme, as it is the most popular as of right now in the news. But you can ask ChatGPT to create a variation of an existing blog post or article. So these slides aren't intended for you to sit down and read them, but you'll see that for everything we discuss here, we've actually included prompts fed into the system. So I asked ChatGPT, can you make a blog post so that is unique? I fed it a blog post, in this case, from the Lectrix website, and I'm only showing snippets of screenshots here. But ChatGPT was able to take that material and then regurgitate it into something that is unique from what I had provided it. The big thing here, and the big recurring theme, is the most success you're going to see with a generative AI tool like ChatGPT is by providing it content to work off of and not asking it to work from scratch. We're going to go into the risks of the tool later in the presentation, but in a space like the electronic component industry, where topics can get very technical, they can become very cutting edge, dealing with recent developments. Even the concept of generative AI's impact on the data center, for instance, the processing demands, the need for more cooling. These are going to be a lot of topics that a tool like this wouldn't necessarily be as trained on because they are so recent. But does a good job at making variations of content, as long as you've got another pair of human eyes going through it and editing and cleaning it up a little bit. Here's a common scenario that I think we all probably find ourselves into, and this is going to be that one instance where I make a recommendation for something that you may not have today, or you may. We're in meetings all the time. Many of us spend our days in meetings, and between recordings of meetings and automatic transcripts coming out, it can be difficult to remember, to take notes, to keep track of what am I supposed to do out of this meeting. Microsoft Teams made an announcement the other day. If you're not familiar, Microsoft invested pretty heavily into OpenAI. OpenAI is the company that has created ChatGPT. So there's a partnership there. You probably have heard, or may have heard, Microsoft is incorporating ChatGPT technology into the Bing search results, but is also rolling it out through the Office suite. So one of the things it's embedding it into in one form is Microsoft Teams. There's other platforms out there such as Pilot or Chorus. Chorus is a ZoomInfo platform that are beginning to utilize generative AI to essentially analyze a meeting as it's occurring and take out from it suggested key notes and tasks, and even assign them to the individual that they're relevant for. So at least for myself, this is a significant opportunity to streamline a lot of process in my meetings, at least that I'm often involved in. For Microsoft Teams, I know a lot of us here are probably using Microsoft Teams. Like I said, this is a relatively new announcement over the past couple of weeks. If you take a look for Microsoft Teams Premium, you'll find the information on this. There is, I think, a upcharge based off of a licensing model to have this type of functionality. But we're going to see this type of scenario roll out very, very heavily throughout the Microsoft suite and really throughout, especially SaaS platforms as a whole. To the salespeople out there, I'm sure many of you find yourself in a spot where you're writing a cold email. That cold email may be because you have a prospect that you're trying to get a hold of. That cold email because you have a marketing team that handed you a white paper or a new brochure and is asking you, hey, can you send this out to your prospects directly? ChatGPT can actually provide a lot of benefits, I think, to the sales team who may not be as comfortable in many instances in writing content. A lot of salespeople may not necessarily be copywriters, just as a lot of copywriters aren't necessarily salespeople. So you can let ChatGPT provide you subject lines and alternative body content. And here's an example of this. So in this case, I actually have to provide subject lines based off of conversational emails promoting thermal interface materials, in which case it shot out 5. For doing actual emails themselves, though, I highly recommend having your email draft and feeding it into ChatGPT and asking, can you write this more conversationally? Or can you revise this? Can you edit this? And it's going to streamline your email. It's also good if you want to have a few variations. Maybe you have a couple of different industries you want to hit, a couple different types of products you want to substitute. It'll essentially be able to do that on the fly. And actually, while we're discussing this, if you're did not mention, how do you use ChatGPT? So tools freely available online. There is a premium version. The premium version was just released. It's $20 a month, if I recall correctly, for a premium license. But otherwise, you're able to immediately begin using it today. I'm going to let Jordan speak through this one.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So as the lead of SEO at Letrix, obviously part of my job is trying to figure out how do we leverage new technology to better suit SEO strategy and deploy it faster for our clients. So how do we put together an SEO plan using some of this? So one thing that AI is very good at is semantically creating topic clusters. So forever, our tools were based on just keyword volumes we were getting out of Google for paid search. A lot of vendors have matured and actually have their own versions of what ChatGPT provides here. And we can ask it to essentially build clusters for whether it's a pillar page, a single piece of content, blogs, whatever that may be. So it does a good job of this. The warning here, especially I think for the electronic components industry, is that the more technical the content is, the more you have to have oversight. So we have found not only with ChatGPT, but with all tools that these require major edits. It's a great starting point. So you can even see how we went through this exercise for just EMI filters here. So it very correctly, in our opinion, identified 3 kind of primary topics, which would be what are they, what are the types, because there's great variation there, and benefits, right? So inside of each of these sections, there's like kind of semantically related questions or keywords. And again, for us, this is a great starting point. It doesn't necessarily replace the manual aspects of SEO strategy, but it really kickstarts things, if that makes sense.
I think where we see the limits to this. So for something like an EMI filter, which is a pretty traditional electronic component, there's a tremendous amount of information out on the web already that generative AI model can be trained on. So essentially, it's like it's being fed information and it's saying, okay, from this information you gave me, now I have an idea. When you start to step into something, though, that may not be quite as popular. So zonal architecture and automotive applications, which may have tremendous opportunity for the electronic component industry, for a few different areas there. That's something that asking a topic cluster for, just as a Test Curiosity really did not provide a lot of insight, very top level topics, nothing in depth, not much we'd really be able to build off of. These tools are evolving though, but the big piece here is just that understanding that if there's a lot of information available on the web, for instance, a tool like this is going to be more beneficial. If there's not a lot of information on the web, then you kind of have to question the results that came out of the tool, because part of that is where did the information, the answers come from, and how varied or how accurate would that information be? And we'll go into that a bit on the risk side. Making images for something like a social media post or a blog banner can be a little bit time consuming, can be a little bit frustrating. There are tools out there like Midjourney who may be able to optimize this process for you. Midjourney is actually operated over a Discord server. If you're not familiar with Discord, it's a platform for really chatting with people. So it's Midjourney's a bot that exists on a server that you chat with, and you provide a direction, and it generates results from the input you give it. Unlike ChatGPT, though, art results in generative AI take a lot more experimentation, a lot more improving of input, and you're given something that's not, for those who work in marketing departments, you're not receiving a layered file. So, editing this stuff is a little bit difficult. That said, there are platforms coming out who are doing a bit more with layered artwork, who are actually generating real 3D models that you can use. But, for instance, here's a prompt I fed into Midjourney to provide me with really a diagram of an electric vehicle out of curiosity. So you can see here, it provided me 4 different results. It actually gave me 4 different results, one of these being one of them. And then I asked it to improve on the one, in which case it provided 4 more that are relevant. The other 3 would not have been appropriate to use in our space, in my opinion. So you can see here, if someone really takes a close look, if they zoom in, they're going to find all types of errors with this, right? The wiring isn't correct. It just, the layout of the vehicle may not make a tremendous amount of sense. But if you're using it in very specific locations, in a piece of a LinkedIn image, if you drop it into a part of a blog header where you're not telling people, really zoom in on this, it's a very quick way to get some pretty interesting artwork. Here's one that I think may be interesting for the salespeople in the room, because it's something that I see happen all the time. Companies post on LinkedIn, and a lot of companies encourage their teams, especially on the sales side, to share the posts. So LinkedIn is operated by something that's referred to as your SSI score, your social selling index score. At the end of the day, it determines how visible your posts and interactions are with those that you're connected to. So essentially, do your posts appear in their newsfeed? As a salesperson, you're likely connected with a lot of prospects, a lot of companies that you're looking to do business with. So you want yourself to appear as frequently as possible in these other people's news feeds, in your prospects' news feeds. So say your company puts they post a blog on their LinkedIn channel and they ask you to share it. A lot of individuals seem to have a question around what do I introduce it with? How much effort do I have to do in actually writing a post? Can I just share it? And a lot of people seem to default to what I'll call like an empty share. They just share the post. There's no introduction to it. It's just the post itself. That isn't really that great for generating interaction. So in this case, I fed ChatGPT a blog post, actually the same blog post I used in one of the prior examples. And I asked it to put together a conversational style LinkedIn post. What's interesting about ChatGPT and the chat-based generative AI platforms is you can control tone of voice or the tone of the message. Is it strict? Is it stern? Is it conversational? Is it funny? Is it laid back? and it's going to structure that for you. You want to condense it, you can say condensing is going to shorten it. But for the sales team who's trying to encourage a bit more interaction from their audience to get more word count into those shares, why should someone be clicking on the share? Why are you sharing it? This is a really easy way to make some variations. Again, key point, review it, edit it, make sure it does sound like it's coming from you, but at the same time, it's a really good starting point. In this case with ChatGPT, it even incorporated emojis and hashtags. Obviously you want to double check those hashtags. ChatGPT is only pulling from 2021 for its own database, although as it's getting incorporated in other tools, some of that is evolving. And I think as we all know, this is a very, very rapidly evolving space. Also heavily for the salespeople, and I think you're going to find this to be pretty insightful, especially if you're dealing with a application you may not be incredibly familiar with, or you're trying to figure out the best way to catch a prospect's attention by asking the right questions. So in this case, what you're able to do is use ChatGPT to help identify, obviously it's not going to be perfect, but help identify some of the pain points that your components are able to address. So in this case, I told ChatGPT, I'm a salesperson working for a rep, essentially in the electronics industry. I listed some of the electronic components that I sell, in this case, connectors, heat sinks, EMI shielding, power supplies. I'm meeting with a prospect that manufactures drones for last mile delivery. What are my prospect's pain points? And in design engineering specifically, and how may my solutions help address them? Is this going to be the most insightful response you receive in your life? No. Is it going to get you farther than going to this blind? Yes. There's more results than what I have here. I only took a small screenshot, but it immediately identified size and weight, power management, signal integrity as three of the main problems that are going to be faced. In this case, for size and weight, it starts discussing the need for lightweight components. For power management, looking for ways to manage power more efficiently to maximize the drone's range and payload capacity. So high efficiency with low power loss power supplies. Signal integrity, big piece here, because you obviously don't want to be don't want to be interfering with drones navigation, for instance. So it starts discussing the need for high quality connectors and EMI shielding solutions to reduce interference and ensure signal integrity. Really just quick way, it takes a minute to type this into ChatGPT and walk away with a prompt that will help guide you in conversation with a prospect. Again, you want to understand what you're looking at. You can't take everything for the exact word provided, but it's going to give you a good starting point. And, on the sales side, not just preparing for a conversation, but this can then be adapted to, maybe these are pain points I want to address in an email. You have a cold email going out. Maybe it's something I want to post on LinkedIn, and you can adapt it that way. For the marketers out there, repurposing content is often the quickest way to expand your content library. And we know that in the marketing world, in today's age, content is critical, from everything from search engine optimization to lead generation to establishing your brand as a thought leader is just really, really a critical piece. So what you're able to do here is, say you're hosting a webinar, and from that webinar, you have a transcript. A 45-minute webinar creates a very, very lengthy transcript. And at least the tools that I'm familiar with today are not capable of fielding an entire, I think a lot of these may actually be about a page a minute. So it's not going to take a 45-page webinar transcript. But what you can do is go through that transcript and take out sections. So you have a few paragraphs that may have aligned with a slide or two that may make sense as a story. What you can do is feed that into ChatGPT and ask it to adapt that video transcript into a blog post. So what I had taken was a snippet of a webinar that we had recorded a few years ago as part of our Thermal Live. Like I said, we're also a publisher. We host an online event called Thermal Live. Series of webinars in this case was around liquid cooling and the need for disconnect solutions. So I took a few paragraphs that I thought made sense as standalone items, and I fed it into ChatGPT and asked it to turn it into a blog post. Again, as mentioned, a blog post like this would need to be heavily reviewed and edited. You probably want to clean it up quite a bit, but it does work best when you're feeding it information like you are in this case. So that's a blog post from a few paragraphs of a webinar transcript. Think how long that webinar transcript is, and then you can really see how quickly you can start adapting into quite a bit of content to support your marketing efforts. And if you're looking to diversify with even more content, you can do a little bit of the inverse. You could take a blog post and ask it to turn it into a video script. And you can even specify that you also want a shot list. So in this case, I took one of our blog posts on a young engineer survey that we actually presented here with the CIA last year, I believe it was, or maybe a little bit longer. And it put together a video transcript with shot lists, and then actually at the end, you don't see in the screenshot here, it compiles that shot list. So it includes everything. It says, hey, you're looking for essentially stock video or looking to shoot photos for these types of things. Is this a video script I would have personally written? No. That said, I could have just as easily gone back and started asking it to adjust the tone or switch kind of the method or way, I guess, tone at the end of the day of how trustworthy this material is. Here's an easy one that I actually did out of curiosity using this and did not, or did putting together this PowerPoint presentation, but did not actually incorporate the recommendations for demonstration purpose. If you write an email, write a blog post, your product descriptions, anything, web page copy, you can feed it into ChatGPT and ask it to proofread and edit it and even modify it to some extent. Editing tools have been around forever. Many of us have probably used a tool like Grammarly, which is a very popular one. A lot of that functionality will be the same as what you're experiencing in ChatGPT. What ChatGPT does, I guess, which is nice, is it consolidates everything into a single interface that makes it a little bit easier to interact with. But in this case, I took the initial outline that I started to build for this presentation and fed it into the tool and asked it to proofread and edit the text. So it did. It provided me with a series of recommendations for revising my slides that look like this. Provided recommendations on how to reword the statements on these slides and so on. I could have also asked it to provide some inspiration, some brainstorming to expand on the PowerPoint as well. It's pretty impressive and a little bit creepy as to quite how capable it is. At the same time, again, it's really so heavily reliant on the user recognizing the limits of technology like this. It's very, very critical, which leads us into this next piece. So I asked Midjourney to paint me a dystopian world that is run by ChatGPT. And this is the image it generated. So there's a lot of capability, but where are the risks? Jordan and I were speaking through this, and he's about to take over from here. But the big thing to keep in mind is this is very, very new technology. We're really in a open environment where things like regulation and so on are just starting to become a topic. So please understand that this is very rapidly evolving.
Yeah, and I think the way to look at kind of the risk section here, Jeff, is through the lens of you have showed us a lot of ways to enhance what we're already doing to make us more efficient. Like we can use this technology as a tool to enhance creation as we've already have it. So whether you're converting a blog to something new, expanding content, for us as an agency, when we look at what these AI are capable of, the risk really come in is when we're starting from scratch on content or asset creation, right? So when you are asking a system like ChatGPT to write you a blog or write you whatever that piece of content is with a very simple prompt, there's going to be risks that come with that. And I think the big one right now, and the biggest question most creators have, is around the legal aspects of this, right? So AI technology has critically outpaced copyright law over the last 60 to 90 days on this. And our feeling and our thought, which is not just unique to our agency, is that this will catch up. So there will be some level of regulation on this. So people who are going wild right now, creating content, using this tool, there will likely be repercussions, in our opinion. And in the future, it's not really going to be possible, because even the CTO of OpenAI has openly said that these tools need to be regulated to some degree because of copyright issues. So that's a real concern with plagiarism. And also, as a content creator, is something we need to be mindful of, whether you're an agency or a brand. We do need to protect our IP, and we do need to protect our content. So that's one major concern that we have for ourselves and our clients with this. You're muted, Jeff.
Yeah, and there are very much active lawsuits going on today. Getty Images, for anyone that's ever had a website where you accidentally had a stock photo, Getty Images is very well known for putting out lawsuits or threats of lawsuits. The artists are coming together saying your tools are taking my material. The programmers are coming together and saying the same thing. So it's getting interesting as far as the legalities of a lot of this. We had a question come in regarding licenses under Creative Commons, and this is where there is the problem. So in the case of something like Midjourney, there is the argument today as of who actually owns this, because it is not considered to be copywritten or owned content as it is today. Will that change as the result of some of these lawsuits? There's probably a very high likelihood that we're going to see, as Jordan was discussing, crackdown on this.
So the second risk here is, why does everything look the same? So we've already touched on this a little bit throughout the presentation, but ChatGPT and OpenAI have a very limited source of data, if that makes sense. So we won't go into the weeds on it, but they have 5 primary areas they pull information from. One being Wikipedia, a couple indexes they've created themselves from a crawler, which you can think about how Google crawls the web and indexes information. But they're very, very limited, I would say, when you compare that to the sophistication of a Google, who's been doing this for decades. And the question is, if you generate something, why does everything look the same? So this AI particularly follows a pattern, and it generates things that are very similar because people type in the similar prompts, right? So think about it, the smaller the database, or not even database, the smaller area of that database ChatGPT has on a certain topic, think something highly technical, it can't write something varied for many prompts, if that makes sense. So the more specific we get with the question or the request for content, the less unique it's going to be. And again, we kind of touched on this earlier. In our industry with electronic components, we are very specific, and there's a lot less open information on the web or Wikipedia or whatever it may be on our products and their applications. So for us, that's a very big red flag when using it to create content. The next piece of this is, how does Google treat this? Google has come out and said that they aren't necessarily waging war against content that is written by AI. I think in their mind, as long as the content is unique and useful and it has that level of expertise that we always speak to our clients about, they're totally fine with that. The issue is that the AI right now is not really sophisticated enough, in our opinion, to pass that test with Google without some major human intervention. So you're not necessarily going to get flagged or dinged for using AI to write content, but the product that you get out of the AI will probably get you in trouble in the future.
Yeah, and Google is increasingly, I mean, it's been this way for years now on the SEO front. As Jordan mentioned, the quality component is critical. So it used to be Google ran a system it referred to as EAT, which is that it wants its content to be demonstrating expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. Recently added another E to it with experience. They want experience to be proven, and that means demonstrating that content is unique. That means demonstrating that the author of the content knows what they're writing about and is credentialed. Although this hasn't rolled out quite the same way in the electronic space, in the medical world, this has hit very hard in that Google really wants to see that the author is credentialed. So you're assigning content to an author, and that author needs to have a pedigree, a doctorate, or whatever it may be. And that's the type of direction this is going to be moving, even into the engineering world, is that we're able to say this individual wrote this. This is why they're an authority on the subject. And as mentioned, this is just so rapidly evolving. It was 6 weeks ago, I think even less actually, maybe 2 weeks ago, that Google updated their policy. Beforehand, generative AI or AI generated content would have fallen outside of what Google would accept as being acceptable and would consider it a violation of its terms. Now it's saying that it's okay as long as it's of good quality and really more as an aid to assist an author, not to replace a human author. Big thing to note there is that Google is in a AI arms race with Microsoft now, and Microsoft's ties with open AI. So Google has Bard is the name of their platform in development today, and we're definitely going to see, I think, some rapid evolution even in regards to how Google and other search engines treat this type of material.
So the third risk comes down to accuracy, and these all kind of are interwoven together. The visual you see here is that we put a prompt into Midjourney for a realistic hand. And I was actually unaware of this a little bit, and Jeff informed me that apparently AI has a very hard time drawing hands. So these creepy images you see here is the output of that. So it's more of a visual as how good can the AI perform in creating something from scratch. And here we're talking about content, we're talking about accuracy, especially when something again, is as highly technical as our products and their applications and the supporting content around that. Content accuracy is very important based on the audience. And also too, it's kind of interesting to think about relying on an AI tool to write something highly technical without having an ability to trace the source. Because today we have no idea where the information is really coming from. Again, they tell us vaguely these 5 more or less indexes, but we don't know who wrote it, what company owns it, if it was well researched. So again, if anyone wants to go down the route of creating content from scratch, there's still going to be a high level of human intervention just for accuracy's sake.
Yeah, and I would add that I think as we see these models evolve and these tools evolve, and there's a high chance they likely will. And I think Bing is starting to do it in their search results. I'm sure Bard will as well. Start citing material. It actually switches the SEO race a little bit. It's not just at that stage wanting to appear at the top of search results. Now you want to be potentially racing to become the cited source. So demonstrating that you are the most knowledgeable on a given topic so that these models do pull from you and cite that when it gets to the point that they do start citing. The other side of it is that these platforms in theory are even competitive to your own websites if they search through here directly versus going to Google and landing on your website. So there's some business threat with this type of technology. But yeah, as Jordan mentioned, Midjourney, other AI art tools like DALL-E, which is owned by OpenAI, cannot draw hands well. They have a hard time with legs. But compare that to the complexity of engineering content, and you can see where that kind of goes a little haywire. evolving just as rapidly as generative AI tools like ChatGPT are tools to try to figure out, is content legitimately written by a human? So first, OpenAI recently came out with their own tool called AI Text Classifier. The example I'm showing here, though, is from a platform called GPT-0, which can be used to identify both content written by an AI and content that has been plagiarized. The really big risk here is that you have AI generate a whole piece of content for you, you post it online, someone reaches out to you and tells you that this content's been plagiarized from my website. You don't realize that it's plagiarized because it came from a tool, but that tool is using this other content to feed its answers to you. So accidental plagiarism is a real threat and has been, made public by OpenAI as a major concern. So with GPT-0, for instance, you can feed in a body of text. So I fed in this screenshot a snippet of one of the responses that ChatGPT gave me, asked it to validate the text. And as you can see down here, your text is likely to be written entirely by AI. What's actually interesting with this is if you feed in a body of text that may be partially influenced by AI, it will highlight the sentences and give you a note that portions of this may have been written by AI, whereas others don't. Again, the accuracy of these tools is also a little bit hit or miss. We really are in an unknown area. I wrote a piece of content myself, and out of curiosity, fed it in here. And it was a white paper that I had written, and it highlighted 2 or 3 sentences that it told me may have been created by AI, but they weren't because I wrote them. Although some people tell me I sound robotic, so maybe it is AI. But yeah, you have to take the tools for the fact that they are tools and not the solution to everything. And that brings us through the presentation. We have quite a few questions, but now's the time. If you have other questions, feel free to type them in, drop them in the box. I'm going to start going through the answers now. We received a question regarding the LinkedIn use case of providing introduction to a shared post. And the question is there likelihood dozens of similarly worded shares will also exist? We discussed, since this question came in, the risks of a lack of uniqueness for content. So this is really where it comes again to the idea that you should feed it information, feed it the content that you want it to create the LinkedIn post from. Don't just ask it to write a LinkedIn post. The more content you feed it, the less likely it's going to be really just similar to everything else out there. Will you see some patterns? 100%. And again, that kind of stresses the need that you should take a decent look at what you're doing. At the same time, for minor content production use cases like this, it gets you much farther along the way than if you're going to sit down and write a post from scratch. We received a question about, I believe, using ChatGPT. What would happen if you referenced a prospect's company name in a prompt? And the big thing to note here is that as these tools are right now, and as they're getting more integrated into search engines, depending on how much they feed that search engine data into these models, that's a question mark. These tools aren't really designed to provide company level personalization. That said, just out of curiosity, I took one of the prompts while on this meeting when Jordan was talking. So if you saw me look away, and I asked it to personalize subject lines to Lockheed Martin, for instance. And the subject lines did get personalized to Lockheed Martin, but not personalized in any sense that would demonstrate a business understanding of who Lockheed Martin is, as an example. we received a question about tools that detect AI generated content, which we had answered. Okay, so there's a question about ChatGPT. It has a free version, as I referenced earlier, and that there is a text. There's a limitation on text as to how much input you can put into it, or actually output that comes out of it. That limitation is both in the free and in the paid version. It will limit you based on the amount of text you input. My comment earlier regarding putting in a webinar script, which I'm not sure where that is in this slide deck as of now, right here. As a sample, I pulled in only portions of the webinar to prepare it. So I pulled in 4 or 5 paragraphs that seem to stand on their own as a discussion point, and then fed that, not the entire webinar script. Jordan, this one I'm going to ask to you. How do we protect our SEO and content and Google rankings with more AI mining our websites? Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, so what we understand right now is that, we've mentioned this a couple of times, is that a platform like OpenAI or ChatGPT, they are crawling and indexing in the same way Google did historically. As far as protecting that content, which, this is something we're paying very close attention to, as this is a primary service we provide clients, is content creation. There, in theory, and what we're thinking, there are going to be ways to opt out. So that's one of the biggest issues from a legal standpoint. You remember when Google launched, that was the big issue, is that there was no way to opt out of being in Google's index. Obviously, that was solved over time using Search Console and certain prompts and in your meta and all those things. So right now, there's really no way to opt out. We do know there are crawlers, right? The ChatGPT has crawlers that we will be able to block in the future. Now, the question is, what is the downside of blocking those, right? Because we know, for example, Bing is openly integrating OpenAI, right? And we don't know what that crawler will look like or be called in the future. So at some point, we may have to try to figure out the balance of, do we want to be crawled? Do we want our content to be seen and potentially being used and generated for someone else at the risk of being de-indexed from search, if that makes sense? So to be fair, right now, we really don't know. We're thinking it's eventually going to get a place where you can opt out of this or block certain sections of the website.
There's a question in regards to whether gated content is accessible by ChatGPT. I think Jordan, expand on this if you think my answer is incorrect, but if your gated content truly requires a form submission to access, then it's not going to be indexed. That said, a lot of companies don't realize, but their gated content housed on their website is often, for one reason or another, accidentally indexable by. Yeah. So I think the question there becomes, is your content indexed and you don't realize it? Do you agree with that, Jordan?
I do, yeah. If it's truly gated, that they will not be able to access that and utilize that in their index.
Legal risks. So a question regarding the legal risks. Right now, is this type of technology useful, or do the legal risks outweigh the rewards? I want to emphasize very much that at Lectrix, we strongly agree that you are feeding the content into ChatGPT or similar tools in which you want it to produce from. I think tools like Midjourney, that's where stuff gets a little bit dicey, because that is art, or there's going to be things like, there's music generators, video generators that are pulling from a library of artwork designed by actual artists to influence what's being output. You do have that same risk in text, but especially in this electronics component industry, where we are dealing every day with just significantly more complicated topics than writing a blog about clothing, for instance. If you feed it the material, then I think it's perfectly fine to use today. And I think on the sales side, especially to do things like to help improve sales emails, the LinkedIn post adaptations to help improve the amount of material you're getting onto there. There really is benefit to using it. But again, give it the information for which it to build from. Don't ask it to build the content from scratch. That's where the risk is. Are options currently available to train ChatGPT based on a specific set of technical information to automate or enable customer service capabilities? So actually, I'm going to jump way up to the head here. Let's see. So there's a few different versions of this. If you do a search online for a generative AI landscape, you're going to find a lot of different recommended platforms. The answer, I think, is yes or no. You're not training ChatGPT as the public-facing ChatGPT interface is. That said, the OpenAI model, which is what feeds ChatGPT, is being fed into other platforms. So I think the natural direction of where this question goes is, can you incorporate a ChatGPT-like bot on your company website that knows everything about your product offering and is able to answer customer service questions? And the answer is we're very, very close to that. I think there's tools right now that are already incorporating it. How exactly it's getting trained off of your product information outside of crawling, I'm not positive on that piece, but I think the answer within the next 6 months to 1 year on this is a definite yes. The options are available. Can we touch upon the sources of info from which ChatGPT training data has been obtained? So they, as Jordan mentioned, they had created essentially their own database based off of crawling and then consolidating that information. Different models have different sources. So in the case of Midjourney, for instance, there's a couple popular art websites. I just went blank on the name of the big one, but artists have actually found cases of their artwork being used. So we know that they were crawled. So a couple of these major art websites were actively crawled and their information taken. So you've got that content theft topic, but I don't know, the actual sources as far as the content side, the written text side is massive. I mean, they were crawling many. What are our views on browser preferences in our industry? We continue to see Google predominantly, some DuckDuckGo, a slight increase in Bing. Curious as to your insights. Yes, it's heavily country dependent. Bing tends to have some more popularity in EMEA. That said, Google still remains dominant. Google's going to be the dominant search engine in North America for, I think, quite some time. Where this does get a little bit interesting is, with Bing's alliance to ChatGPT, if they're able to roll out this functionality, or if for some reason Google is not able to compete with that functionality, it will, I think, eat away really fast at market share. That said, when I think it was the iPhone a few years ago used to default Bing as the search engine, and the impact was not incredibly significant. A lot of people moved back to Google as the default search engine. I think I don't think DuckDuckGo is going to reach the levels of something like a Google as far as the actual browser preferences versus search engine. Chrome, I think, is still up there. Edge has become more popular, but Edge in itself is based off of Chrome. But again, I think as we see this type of technology get implemented into the browsers themselves, rather than going to ChatGPT and just asking directly into the browser, that can change the game really quickly. What do we think of the future of generative AI? We can good cop, bad cop this. Jordan, why don't you give your generative AI?
I'll bet you want me to bad cop. No, I am both excited but very pessimistic at the same time, for all the reasons we've already laid out here. I do think there's a real risk of, plagiarism and stealing work and creativity and ideation, which I don't love. I don't love that for artists or brands or companies. But it is great to incorporate some of this AI into tools. I mean, again, I think that's been the theme of our conversation here, is that these are tools. These are not creative sources. Like, this should not necessarily, replace a creative team inside of an agency or a brand. This should make us smarter and more efficient. Yeah, I think as a nutshell, I think there's risks, but I think there's a tremendous upside as well.
I think, yeah, I agree. There's risks and upsides at the end of the day. This technology can really go one way or another. I think the regulation piece is going to play a big part on where the future of this goes. I mean, this can get cracked down real quick if countries start to get very heavily concerned about things like job security of their citizens and these types of things. If this type of AI starts essentially cannibalizing industries. Europe has major data privacy concerns with GDPR and the likes. So, eventually we're probably going to see this run head on into that, and there's going to be fallout. There was a question regarding the new capability in Teams for the tasks and whether it requires a recording. I actually don't know the answer to that. I think it does require a recording based off of how it's being presented currently from what I've seen, because it actually allows you to bounce through the recording and it breaks it up into chapters based off of topics. And that's part of the functionality. I don't know, though, if it can be done that way, just purely off of transcripts and not from a recording itself. As I mentioned earlier, do a search for Microsoft Teams Premium. This is very, very new functionality, so there's not a tremendous amount out there. But if you look at Microsoft Teams Premium, you will find the information on it. I think right now it's something like an additional $7 a Teams user, moving up to $10 a Teams user soon. Or if you already have Microsoft Teams Premium, which some of the larger organizations here may, it will be included in your functionality. There was a question regarding credit or citation of source. So do they have systems? Do any of these systems have methods for attributing content to where it originated? There's a lot of different types of systems out there currently, so I don't know the answer universally to that question. ChatGPT, as of right now, the answer is no. Midjourney right now, the answer is no. From what I've seen and playing around with Bing's version of ChatGPT, the answer is semi-yes. It's starting to include some cited results, links to relevant pages. For a content creator, though, to kind of force its citation into a tool, say, hey, this is mine, I'm claiming this, almost like claiming your business in Google, Google business, claiming your content as having originated from you, or your content was the foundation. I'm not familiar with that as of right now. And then the last question we received, if I put my content into ChatGPT for a rewrite or for an edit, am I essentially providing it with information that a competitor could also use? That's an interesting question. As of right now, the answer is no. It's ChatGPT is not building off of the input given to it by its users. That said, one thing it does do is, if you've ever used ChatGPT, you essentially start different chats with it, and you essentially have a chat per theme. So if you feed it a blog post, in that chat, it's going to remember the information you gave it. So on future questions, it will reference back to the blog content you put into it. Not saying that that content is then available to competitors, but in your specific chat, it is. And I know we are right at the end here, and that is the end of questions. Thank you to everyone for attending. At Lectrix, if you have any questions on generative AI or how it can be used in your business, we're glad to discuss and meet with you on the topic. Otherwise, Stephanie, a big thank you to the CIA.
Yeah, thank you. This was fascinating information. We really appreciate you guys breaking it down for us. Again, if anybody has questions that maybe we ran out of time for, you couldn't submit it quite yet, you'll see that Jordan and Jeff both have their emails up, or feel free to shoot me an email, and I will, of course, try to get it to the right contact for you. Again, thank you all for joining us today. We will put this up on our website soon. Have a great day.
Have a good one, everybody.